Hi everyone, Lisa Gifford here, and welcome to our next installment for our block of the month. And this is the Tealing Good block of the month. We've already had 3 classes, so now we're on number 4. And of course, this is the end goal. This is our Tealing Good project that we're doing. It's all batiks and all in teal and colors, and these are all featured by Wilmington Batiks. So we're on block number 4. So we're going to put one together for everybody, and we're going to take a minute and go back on taking a look of what we've done so far. But I wanted to go over for just a second August. So every one of our classes is the last Tuesday of the month. But August is going to be a little bit different. I will be out of town for that week. We're going to upstate New York for a wedding. So I want you to kind of put on your calendars, just kind of jot this down if you're seeing this, if you're following along on the months that we're doing it. So month 8, it will be our block 8. Actually, we're going to be doing block 10, A and B. But that date for that class is going to be on August the 20th. So we're just going to do it on a Tuesday still, but we'll have it a week earlier because I'll be out of town for that following week. So I will start announcing that, every time we have the show, that's the date that we're going to be doing month 8, and it's going to be on August the 20th. So hopefully you guys are all caught up on the blocks that we have done so far. And if you want, just follow me over. I've got all of them on the design wall that we have been doing. So here is the ones that we did in our first class. We did block 1 and we did block 8. So that's the 2 that we did. No, I take that back. Yep, we did I believe we did both of these. 1, 2, 3, yep. So we did block 1 and block 8. So block 1, this is I believe is the cornerstone, the very centerpiece that's in the quilt. And you only had to make 1 of these. So then some of the techniques that we were learning throughout this process is we're learning how to do flying geese, we're learning the hourglass block, and then we were doing half square triangles here. So that was a really good technique to start with this one. Then we did block 8. You had to make 4 of those. Again, repeating on the flying geese, half square triangles, and then another hourglass in the center of that one. You had to make 4 of number 8. Then the second month we did block 2 and 7. So block 2, we learned again back to the flying geese that we had on the 4 corners here. But here's where we did these 4 pieces right here, where it was a block and then a square, and then we actually did the covered corners here, or another people like to call it maybe stitch and flip. So we're learning that, and then we put them all together in a 4 patch to make this look here. So I had to make 4 of number 2. Then block 7, we also back to 4 flying geese, and then we did that same 4 patch in the middle, but only 2 of them had the flip and stitch or covered corners to make this block here. Block 3, the one we did last month. Now this was interesting because we were doing a 16 patch, but we learned how to make it on point. So that's where these corner pieces came into play, and those were pretty simple to do. And that was a fun block, and we only had to make 4 of those. So now we're on month 4. So here is our block for month 4. So we're backing into some of the techniques we've already learned. We've got our half square triangles here. We got our flying geese here. We got our 4 patch like we learned in some of the other places, but now we put that 4 patch on point like we learned before in block 3 by adding these pieces here and then putting them all together. So that is what we're going to be making today. You only have to make 4 of these, and then we'll be going on to the next month. All right. So one of the things that I had talked about on organization was to be able to have some Post-it notes. I found that they always worked very well in labeling everything that you do, all the pieces that you cut out, and then as you're doing each segment, then they get another label. So that's why I always use the Post-it notes. It was easy to just add another Post-it note as I got each component done for the block. I also found by having everything in a binder with clear page protectors, keeps everything all nice and neat and easy to flip to. I use the large bags to be able to store all of my fabric pieces in. These are just some of the tools that I found that really helps in making this project go together so quickly and keeps everything organized. Other tools that I'm using a lot of, I'm using, of course, the clips, some pins. I'm using the Martelli marking tool because a lot of these fabrics are really in dark, so you can't see your line when you're having to do your half square triangles. So I'm having to use the marking tool with the white. But if you're using a lighter fabric to have you drawing your line through, like we're going to see on letter F, fabric F, a regular pencil works for that. So I guess we're going to go ahead and dive right in. So how's everybody doing? I hope you all have caught up and are ready to go for block number 4. It's actually going to be a quick little block. It doesn't take long to put this one together at all. So if you're a little bit behind, this will be easier to get yourself all caught up on it. So the fabrics that we had to pull for this one was fabric E and fabric F, G, I, N, O, P, R, S, and T. So those are the fabrics that you have had to pull. Now, I've had all of mine in their bags, and I have them all labeled, so it's easy to get to. And because we have this little chart that's at the beginning of the pattern, you're able to take a look at the beginning chart, the quilt components for the program, and it tells you which fabric, like fabric A, was being used for blocks 1 and 2 and 9. So you're able to see where those fabrics are also being utilized in the later months as you're going through. So as I was doing some of my cutting of those fabrics for whatever block that or month that I'm on, I was able to take a look and see, well, where else am I going to use this, and go ahead and get those fabrics, get that same fabric cut up for those other ones. Just taking that little step just made it go through a little bit quicker. All right, so let's go ahead and let's get started on all of our fabrics. So once you pulled E and F out, so E and F are both cut. It's telling you to cut them into 4-inch strips, and then you cut them into 4-inch squares. So here is E and F both cut into my 4-inch squares. So those are prepared, and then the next one after those was G. So when I got my G pulled out, you had to cut it into 3 7/8-inch strips, and then you're cutting those into 4 3 7/8 squares, because then we're going to be splitting those. Let me go through that here. Splitting those in half, and then you're also going to have 3 1/2-inch squares. So here's my G's here and here. So those of you who got our strip ruler, which was our, when you got the kit, you got the 1/2-inch and the, I believe the 3 7/8, I think it was 7/8. And so if by 5/8 and 7/8 on the strip ruler, seam allowance strip ruler, and that's where one of those uses that you would be able to use that ruler to be able to cut those strips. And then if you got the template sets, I actually have a 3 7/8-inch template in here, so it made quick work of being able to cut out my 4 3 7/8 squares, and then you're going to be cutting those in half diagonally because you're going to be using this component in a later, in a later block. Then you had to cut out 4 of the, I believe you had to cut out 8 3 1/2-inch squares, and that's what these are right here. The next fabric was I and T. Both of those uses the same thing. So with I and T, you're cutting those into 3 1/2-inch strips, and then you are cutting those into 3 1/2 by 6 1/2-inch pieces, and that's these right here. So here's your I and T. You'll be using those next, and you had to cut out 4 of each one of those, I believe. Yep, 4. I and T. You needed to have 4 3 1/2 by 6 1/2-inch strips. We also had a template for that. Then N, we were cutting into 2 5/8-inch strips, because then you had to have 2 5/8-inch squares. So you had to have 4 of those. And again, we also have a 2 5/8-inch square. So it made really quick work of that. And a lot of times I was able to use some of the scrap fabrics that we had from previous blocks and get my pieces cut out, because I keep them all together. And then O was 3 7/8, so then you had to have 4 3 7/8 cut for that same thing. Then we were splitting those in half. And then you had to, so it would leave you with 8. And then your subcutting, also you needed 4 of the 2 5/8 squares of that one. Going into P, it was, you needed to have 32 3.5-inch squares. And so here's all of my 3.5-inch squares of P, and it's going to tell you a little bit later to go ahead and draw your diagonal line on the back side of every one of those. And here you'll see, because it was a dark fabric, I had to use my white marking tool to be able to see my line that you draw a corner to corner on that one. And then go into R, that one was cut into the 3.5 by 6.5-inch pieces, and that's these right here. And then finally, S, you cut those into 8, 2, and 5/8-inch squares, and that's the ones that I have right here. So those are all the components that you need to be able to put together this block. So we put it together in segments. So going to the first one, it actually has you starting with making the 4 patch. So I am going to pull my board aside, and with this one, you're going to grab your 2 and 5/8-inch squares. Let's see. Got some. Joan, so glad you're caught up. Hey Brenda, how you doing? All right, so here are my 4. It asks you to pick up the 3 fabrics. It is your S, N, and O. Those are the ones that you cut in 2 and 5/8-inch squares. And then you're going to go ahead and sew those up into a 4 patch. So looking at the diagram, it has you putting an N here. So I'm just going to go ahead, we'll just do the 1. And then you have an S right beside it in 2 places. So you need 2 S's for this block. I got my 2 S's. And then you're also going to need your O, and that's this one right here. So that you get your 4 pieces together. This would be a good one that would be quick to chain piece these up. So you have your N. It's going to be, as far as I'm looking at it, it's going to be on my top left. Then I have my S top right, S bottom left, and then my O bottom right. So that is my 4 patch. So I'm going to sew these together, and then I'm going to put those 2 together. So we're going to nest our seams, because I'll probably be pressing this to the dark and this one to this dark, and then my seams are going to nest very well. So let's go to the sewing machine and get our first component done. This one is actually going to be called Unit 1, but it quickly changes to Unit 2 when we add our side pieces to make this block become on point. So I'm going to grab these pieces here. I'm going to go ahead and just take the dark, place it over the light, and grab these 2 and put them here. And so I don't get them turned around, I'm going to go ahead and put a clip on the sides that I'm actually going to be stitching. So I'll be stitching here, and I will be stitching here. That one has some glue on it. So we'll be stitching this one and this one, and then we'll get them pressed and then go to the next step. Now this is, I have my machine set up on a 1/4 inch, but because these blocks need to finish out at 12.5 inches, I found if I kept it right on my 1/4 inch, it was so close to it, almost just shy of it by a couple of threads. So this project, I found it was easier to do a scant 1/4 inch. So what that means is you're just sliding your needle over about 2 or 3 threads. So I just move it just a little bit so that it's a scant 1/4 inch. So just remember, whenever you're doing this every month, if you're doing this scant 1/4, be sure to do it for every single piece, because sometimes you can forget, and if you were doing this one for a scant 1/4. All right, so now I'm just going to get this all ready to go. Find my little leader piece, which is on the floor. I like using a little bit of a leader, it just kind of helps a little bit. I have it on a 1/4 inch, and my seam stitch is at 1.8, whatever is set up for the machine. So I'm lining up my fabric, and we're just going to go ahead and sew that down. Like this one would have been easy for you just to chain piece all these pieces together. And all these pieced up. All right, there we go. All right, so I'm going to clip these apart. And I'm keeping them in the same orientation of how the block is. I'm going to go ahead and press these. Just give it a finger press to the dark side. This one I'm pressing towards the green. And I'm going to be pressing towards the green on this one too. Just giving a little finger press. Once you've done that, then you're going to go ahead and place them together, nesting up that seam. You should feel it right there. You can put a clip there to hold it. And then we're going to stitch 1/4 inch down the side. Making sure everything is still nested nice. All right, so let's go to the iron. Let's give this a press. So I pressed those there. So I'm going to just kind of secure that press. But I'm going to go ahead and press this back seam open. This is where I join the two blocks together. I didn't bring my little tool with me. So I'm just going to give it a press open. Not sliding my iron over it, just pressing it down. And it should look something like that. That's what you're looking for. All right, so let's go ahead and skip with the next phase of it. So you're going to be making four of these. So laying it back out. Now we're going to go ahead and turn it where I've got the white on top, the lightest one on the top, and the two greens on each side. Now you're going to go ahead and get your O and G's that you had cut. And you had cut those on the diagonal. It was the squares that you had cut on the diagonal. So you're going to need 2 O's. And I keep everything together, so I'm grabbing 2 of my O's, which would have been 1 square cut, in half. And I'm grabbing 2 of the G's. I believe these were the ones that were cut 3 7/8, and then you split them down the center. So looking at the photo that they here to make unit 2, you're going to put the O's are going to be up on top, and the G's are going to be on the bottom. So I found the easiest way to construct this piece right here, these pieces, I'll raise this up so you can see it, is to do opposite corners. So I'm going to put this one on first and this one on second, then we'll press that one, and then we'll do this one, the other top, the left top, and then the right bottom. It was easier than just doing these two and then doing these two. It all seemed to fit together pretty well. So we're going to do opposites, whatever side you do, just do the opposite. So you're going to put an O on top and the G on the bottom, and then do the second O and the G after you've pressed it. All right, so I am going to go ahead and grab these, keep them in the order that we have it, so I don't get anything out of sync, and we'll put these together. So do I have any comments or questions out there?
Yeah, there's a question.
Okay.
If you're cutting out a 3.5-inch square to make half triangles, what size does the half square triangle end up as?
If you're cutting 3.5-inch squares, let me go back. If you're cutting out a 3.5-inch square to make half square triangles, what size does the half square triangle end up to be? It's going to be 2 and, hold on, I'll tell you exactly what it's going to be. So if it's at the half, three and a half. I think it's going to be 2 5/8. So like if you wanted to have a 3.5-inch half square triangle, You would cut your fabric at 3 7/8 if you wanted to be perfect without doing any trimming or anything. A lot of people, if they wanted to get a 3.5 inch, I believe they go ahead and cut their 4s. But I believe it's the 3 7/8 that gets you to the 3.5. So I'm trying to think if it's 3.5. What size is the half square triangle? Well, I got them over there because we did E and F's were cut at 4 inches, but you had to square them down. So at 4 inches, those were two 4-inch squares, E and F. So then when we sewed them right sides together, you know, did the trimming, and then we trimmed them down, we had to trim them down to 3.5 because it's a little bit off. But if they were been cut at 3 7/8, then they would have been at the they would have been exactly at the 3.5. Now you're talking about, the question was at 3.5. If you're starting off with 3.5, 7/8, so you're talking 1, 2, 3. It'll be 1, 2, 3. It'll be like 3 1/8. So you would trim it down to 3. Is what I think that would be. If you were cutting 3.5-inch squares, we could go ahead and try that. We could cut a couple 3.5-inch squares and do the old school method and seeing how it turns out. Let me grab some fabric and let's play with that. I have some over here. I'm going to grab a dark and a light. I'm going to grab some cake. We're just going to make one. We're going to try it at the 3.5. So I'm just going to get me a little, you know, I probably have lots of scraps down here. Here's a blue. Let's see if that fits my 3.5-inch square. Right there, right on the money. And let's grab this little piece of black right here. All right, so I'm going to cut out a 3.5-inch square out of the black and this blue. Let's see how close we are on that. I'm going to do a test. Clean that up a little bit there. So there's this one. And we're going to do a black one. All right, so here's my 3.5-inch square of the black. Now we got to draw a line. So let us go ahead and grab our marking tool. I'll use the pencil and we will draw our line on the back of the blue. I'm going to go right to the point, to the point. And we're going to see what this works out to be. I think it's going to be 3 1/4 or 3 1/8, but we'll know. So now I'm going to go ahead and put these together, lining up my edges. And I'm going to put a pin in these so it doesn't shift. So I'm going to put a pin here and here. Now we're going to sew a 1/4 inch down away from this line on both sides. So I'm going to move my needle back to where a true 1/4 inch instead of a scant 1/4. And we're just going to run this down the side. Doing the old school. We're going to go down the other side, keeping my threads together, and 1/4 inch down this side. right, so let's go ahead and cut this out right down the center. We're going to cut on the line that we just drew. Now we're going to go give this a press. Let's see what this works out to be. I'm going to press 1 to the dark side. Now you got a lot of bias here, so you don't want to stretch or pull it. You're just going to just gently press down without pushing. You don't want to distort. This one, we're going to press that seam open. I need my little tool. It's over here somewhere. I'm going to open it up a little bit. I'm trying to get more in the habit of using a tool to open up that seam so I don't get my fingers in the way like I burnt my finger the other day. And now this one here, I'm just opened it up, and then I'm just going to press it down. I'm not stretching or pushing the fabric. We're just opening the seam. Then we're going to go measure these to see what size they are before you do any trimming. All right, let's get this one figured out. Now I haven't trimmed off any of the dog ears or anything. We're just going to see what we get by just cutting 3.5-inch squares. So I'm going to grab my little scissors and I'm going to trim these little dog ears off so we don't get them in the way. I'll just trim right here. Right along the edge of the fabric. And we're going to trim this one off right here. So the one that we pressed back measures 3 1/8, just like I figured it would be. 3 1/8. So we did 3.5-inch squares. So subtract whatever size that you're doing, subtract 3/8. That's why when we cut our squares to be 3.5 inches, if we want our half square triangles to be 3.5 inches, and you don't want it to be perfect where you don't have to do any trimming, then it would be 3 7/8, and then when you sew it, it's going to be a 3.5. That's why a lot of people will cut them at 4 so they can trim them down. So this one here should be the exact same thing. Let me go ahead and get these little dog ears off. And I did not do a scant quarter on this one. I did a full 1/4-inch seam allowance. So this one here is 3 1/8. It's also 3 1/8. So they're both 3 1/8. So if you needed them to be 3 inches, you would just trim them down a little bit. Does that help? Keep it closed for the size. I guess I don't know the question. Keep it closed. So whatever you're trying to get, so just add 3/8 inches to that. So if you're, and that would be if you're not wanting to trim it down at all. If it needs to be a 3.5-inch unfinished, you would be cutting at 3 7/8. Or if you wanted to trim them down to that perfect 3.5, then do it at the 4. If you needed it to be a 2-inch unfinished, then you would be doing 2 3/8, I guess is what you would be doing. So you would just add the 3/8 to it, whatever size that you're working on, or subtract it. I hope that helps with that one. All right, so we got a couple 3 1/8 inch squares here. All right, so let's go back to what we were doing. Now we're on creating unit 2. You've got to make 4 of these. So I want to make sure I have everything. My O's are on top, my G's are on the bottom, and we're going to go ahead and turn this 4 patch onto point by adding these pieces here. Now there is lots of bias here, lots of bias right on these long pieces right here. So you do not want to do any stretching or any pulling when you're laying this down. So I'm going to give you the little hint of what I did. So I'm going to pull these, set these over here, because we're going to start with this lighter colored one. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to place it down where I have the wrong sides together, and what I'm looking for before I line up this edge is I want my point right here to be on that seam line. That's where it's going to be centered onto that seam line. So I'm lining up my edges. I'm not paying attention what's going on here or here. I'm more focused to making sure that this point is in the center of this block, right there. If you want, you could grab a clip and you could just clip it once you have it along the edge so it stays in place. You want to make sure that that point is right there along that seam line, and then you're going to go ahead and do your stitching all the way down. So I'm going to readjust my machine up to where I've been doing all my stitches on. We're going to sew this one first, and then we're going to sew the G onto the opposite side. All right. You get my machine needs a spa day. It's not cutting threads like it should. I think I need to get Albert over here working on it. All right, so that's the first one. So now we're going to go to the opposite. We know that that's going to be the G fabric. So it's going to be on the other side. So again, making sure I'm putting right sides together. I'm moving this one out of the way just a little bit, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm lining up that point of that block to be of that piece to be on the seam. So I know that it's going to be centered. I'm not paying attention to what's going off in these directions. I want that point to be centered. And then I'm going to line it up on my edges. And if you want to go ahead and clip it, you can give it a clip to hold it in place, and then you're just going to go ahead and stitch it down. Okay, so we're going to press this first before we go on to the next phase. If there's any more questions for me, just let me know, Olivia. All right, I like to set my seams first. So I'm going to place my iron and get those seams nice and set before I roll it back. So I'm just going to gently roll it back, again, because of all that bias. Even though these are straight a grain, this right here is all bias, this long seam. So I'm gently pushing it back and going to lay my iron right there and not do any pushing. You're just pressing. Bias can certainly distort a quilt, so be very careful at this point, and then just give it a good press. So we got some little dog ears here, 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 here. You can go ahead and trim those off. Kind of following the edge. Get your little pieces off. Because the next two pieces that we're going to put on here is going to create the seam allowance for the block. All right. All right, let's go to the next phase. So knowing that the white square is on top, you want to make sure you don't lose your orientation, and we're doing the opposite pieces. This one is the right side right here. So now we're going to go ahead and grab, I believe it's the O, and we're going to put this one down. So doing the same thing, I'm not really paying attention to what's going on the edges. I'm focusing on this point on this seam. Want that point to be right there on that seam, and then adjusting it as you need. and then grabbing a clip and clipping it right there. And then we're going to go ahead and sew our 1/4 of an inch all the way down. So I got a call today from Miss Kathy Delbon. I got to send her a pattern that was in one of her kits. And she is working on a block called Cleopatra's Fan. Have you all heard of Cleopatra's Fan? I've seen it, but I guess I hadn't thought about it in a long time. What a beautiful block that is. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and get, you guys need to look up Cleopatra's Fan. It is beautiful, absolutely beautiful. A lot of pieces, but it is beautiful. I think I might need to make a template on that one. All right, so same thing, I'm kind of moving this piece to the side so I can get my next one, right sides together, doing the exact same thing, lining up my point onto that center seam, lining up my edges, and then we'll go ahead and put a clip there to kind of hold it in place. And then we're going to go ahead and stitch this side down. Get my little leader in here. All right. Ooh, I hear thunder. We're going to go ahead and gently press this one back like we had done previously. Just giving a gentle rolling it back. Let's go ahead and set those seams first. Makes them a little bit more pliable. We'll just gently roll it back. Not pushing, not stretching. And then giving that a press. And then let's get our other side done. And what this did, it made our perfect seam allowance for when we go to sew on our next step. I'm going to grab my block press for this. And we'll get it under that block press and let it set for just a second. Any more questions out there? Are we good?
Someone said lots of good info in your video.
Well, thank you. Thank you. All right, let's see what we can do next. Okay, so now I see I've got some dog ears. I'm going to go ahead and take a second. We're going to trim those off. Just get those little dog ears right off of there. Little bitty notches. We just extra bulk that we don't need. All the way across. Okay, so let's go back over here to our main table. So you'll be making 4 of these, and when you get them done, they will be measuring 6.5 inches unfinished. I always like to check, so I'm going to go ahead and put on my board, on my mat, and I'm going to measure it out, and it is right on the money for 6.5 inches. What I needed it to be, 6.5 inches. And you'll note by doing that opposites, I've got a really nice seam allowance at all 4 of these points. And that's what you want when you go to sew your next pieces together. So once you have those done, now you've got to start with your E's and your F's. So I'm going to set this one aside, grabbing our E's and F's. Now if you look, E and F, once you get them sewed together, they turn into Unit 3. So if I look at the finished block here, Unit 3 is used on 2 of the top corners of the final block. So I'm only going to need to sew 1 of them up. So you're cutting 4 of each, so 1 set goes on each block. So we're going to grab an E, And then I'm going to grab one of the F's. And it tells you to draw your line from corner to corner on your F because it is lighter. So I actually was able to use a regular pencil to lightly draw my line from corner to corner. And one of the things you need to pay attention to when you are drawing your line is making sure that you are dead into that corner, not off, because if you have it off, then it's going to mess up the block at the final stage when you're sewing along that line. Make sure, take the time when you are drawing your line that you are right on that point to point. It'll make it so much easier by doing that. So once you have your lines drawn on all of your F's, now we're going to do our half square triangles just like you saw me do with the 3 1/2. So this fabric here was, if I'm not mistaken, these were cut into 4-inch squares because they want you to square them up to 3 1/2 inches. But if you wanted to be perfect and on the money, you could have cut these at 3 7/8. But we're going to follow what it says in the instructions. They had these cut at 4 inches. Then we'll have to square them up to 3 1/2 inches. So you want to make sure you have all of your lines or all of the edges of your fabrics together. This is where if you want to do a little pin to make sure nothing shifts for you, then put your pin on each side of the line but far enough away so that it's not going to be, your foot will not be encumbered by the needle that you put in here, the pin that you're using to hold your fabric from shifting. So I just put a little pin so it will not be moving on me. And now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to sew a 1/4 inch, in my case a scant 1/4 inch, on both sides of this line using my little leader. So you will do that to all 4 pieces. So this is a great project to quickly chain piece all these through. I hope you all can hear me well. It is pouring cats and dogs outside right now. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get my little leader started. And I'm going to have the edge of my foot running along this line, then I'm going to flip it around and catch it the other side. Now, I see right here I have a little bit of a shift. Fabric shifted just a touch, so I'm going to correct that first before I go and sew this down. If you cut these out at the 4 inches, they should be exact. Start at the very beginning, make sure everything is not shifted. All right, now we're going to go ahead and get our stitching done. Just following that line all the way down. Take my pins out. Let's go get this cut in half. You can use your scissors. I'm just quickly grabbing my ruler, going to cut right there on the line that we had just drawn earlier. Now you have your 2 pieces. Let's go press these open. And just like we did earlier, we do not want to stress or press it. And I think I'm going to go ahead and press these open. Seem to be doing a lot of the pressing open with this project. So I got my little tool here that's kind of opening up just a little bit. I didn't set my seam. I love to set my seams. It kind of melts that thread into the fabric by setting that seam first. Now we're going to go ahead and get these pressed back open. Again, not pushing, just lifting and pressing down, lifting and pressing down. It's just going to give it more of a professional finish, and you're not distorting your fabrics. That's all biased right there on that seam. Flip it over, give it another press, and I'm going to set this underneath my block press, and then we'll get to the next one. Let's go ahead and get that seam started to be open. And just gently lift and press. And we're almost done. Okay, and we'll put this underneath the block press. While that one's pressing, we're going to go ahead and trim off our little bitty dog ears. Even though with this one we're going to be trimming it up to 3.5 anyway, just getting these out of the way, it's going to make it easier to see. How many of you have been using your block presses? They just make everything so much smoother. All right, so I got these little bitty pieces all done. Get those little dog ears off the table. All right, we're going to move over here. We're going to measure these because we knew that these pieces were cut at 4 inches, right? So these should be 3 5/8, I think. 3 5/8. These were 4-inch blocks. When we cut these 4-inch squares, so before being trimmed, they measure right at 3 5/8, and we've got to get these trimmed down to 3.5. So if you have the Martelli 3.5-inch square, this is what I like to use for squaring up my blocks, getting it to that size. I'm going to take a point, this point here, and the opposite point here, and I'm going to set them onto the seam. And then it will be, you'll still have right where you need for it to be. And I could move it all the way up, but I'm going to go ahead and trim all the way around. So I'm going to just set one corner on one seam and then one corner on the other seam. So I've just got a little bit to trim up all the way around. And now we have our 3.5-inch block. One of the things I also want you to remember when you're using our templates for this, be sure to have your blade resting right up against your template, not any angles at all, right up against the template. So let's get this one trimmed up. Same thing, I'm putting my point onto the seam here, and I'm making sure I'm doing that on the other end. Every time I move it, I'm checking the other side, making sure nothing's shifted. So I just got a little bit to trim up on this one. So again, having my blade right against the template. And last edge here. And now we got our two 3.5-inch squares. So that is that part done. Grabbing the book. Can y'all hear me okay? Because it is really raining. I don't have one on my wish list. Yeah, it is pouring down rain here. Okay, so let's go to, so that was number 4 for this list. So now we're going to go on to number 5. So number 5 is where you had to get all of your pea fabrics, and these were all 3.5-inch squares. So you're going to go ahead and get your line drawn on the back of all of them. There's 32 of them total. So you need to have, based on what I'm looking at, there are 4 flying geese units that we're making. All of them are using the P's for the geese part, and then you're going to be using the I, the T, and the R's. You will be using, trying to make sure you are making, with the R, each block has to have, let me get my glasses back on. So when you make this one, it becomes a 4B. So you have 2 4Bs So you're going to grab 2 of the R's for each block. I believe we had to cut out 8 of those, so you're going to need 2 for each block. Grabbing 2. And then each block is going to have 1 T. That's also the 3.5 by 6.5. And then 1 I, 3.5 by 6.5. We're done with all these. I'm going to set these aside. So we're going to be using P's for every one of these. So you're going to need 2 P's for each unit. So you're going to need a total of 8. There's 2, 4, 6, and 8. So you're going to need 2 for each one of these. So we'll do one side at a time. So how these work, this is the stitch and flip covered corner type method, but we're actually making flying geese. So you're going to take your fabric and you're going to be putting one on one side like this. We'll trim that down, press it open, and then you also do the other side where you're lining up your edges and then you're sewing on the line. Now when I sew these on the line, I found once I get this on here, when I go to sew, I'm going to start here, I will have my needle either on the line or in this case just a little bit to the right of the line. Take into account that this is folded back, and even that little fold takes a thread or 2. So I always have mine always a little bit to the right of the line instead of to the left of the line. If I sew just left of the line, this might not fold all the way back. So I'll fold just a little bit to the right of my line or right on the line. Do not go to the left of the line when you're sewing this, because you're going to have to fold this back and you want this to line up at the edge here. Because we're not trimming this down when we get done, we still want this to measure 3.5 by 6.5 when we're completed. So you're going to do one side first on all of them, and then we'll trim them, press them, and then we'll do this other side. So you just do one side first and then the other side. All right, so let's go ahead and get this started. Yeah, I think that's it. So here's my 4 pieces, and they're each getting the exact same thing on it. Now here's where I go ahead and put my needle back in the middle. For this one. Just easier to have this in the middle. So grabbing my piece, I'm going to go ahead and as I'm looking at it, I will be doing the left side first. So this is one of those times you really want your leader, because you're going to be sewing right into this point, and sometimes the thread, your fabric can go down. So you want to have that leader to stop that. So what you're doing here is you're lining up your fabric, right here on the edge of your 3.5 by 6.5 inch piece. And first off, I want to make sure I got this right sides up. So this one is right sides up. We've already drawn your line on the back side, so it's going to be right sides together. Lining up here on my edges. And now I'm going to go ahead and stitch right there on that line, or just to the right of that line. At that point. Grabbing my next one, making sure I got the right side up. And I believe this one is this way. kind of hard on some of these batiks because they look so similar. Lining up my edges so I can do my next stitch. We're just going to chain piece these along. There we go. We're going to do all 4 of them. Lining up my edges. There we go. And then our 4th one. Went down just like I didn't want it to do. All right. Wanted to eat my fabric right there. Let's get my leader back in here. Right. We'll go ahead and get these pressed back. Then we're going to trim them like we've done all the other flying geese units. And then we'll be able to get to the second side. So go ahead, just taking a moment and getting those seams all nice and set. And we don't want anything to become distorted. Again, all bias right here, so we're just going to gently fold it back. We're looking to see if this seam or the edge of this fabric is lining up with the edge of the piece here, and this one's right where I need for it to be. So then we're going to go ahead and give that a press. Not pushing, not stretching, just pressing down. And then we'll go get to the next one. Same thing, rolling it back, making sure everything is right there on the edges. By the time we get this quilt done, you will be a professional at making flying geese units. And last one. Last one. That one's set. We're just going to go ahead and trim these off. Now, here's a hint. I think I've talked about it before. If you wanted, you could just sew another stitch right here, a ½ inch from this line right here. So then when you go to stitch in between those 2 stitches, you just made yourself a smaller half square triangle. So a lot of people like to do that so they don't waste fabric, because you know how expensive fabric is nowadays. Batiks, what, $13, $14 a yard? So what I'm doing is I am going ahead with my shears. I am just trimming a 1/4 inch from my seam line. and these extra pieces. So if I would have had another stitch here, these would have been just some matching half square triangle units. I'm going to save all these and make a pillow, a matching pillow. And then the last one. And there we go. So there's all these. So let's get the second half done. Now with this side, I lay my fabric on here, but I'm not starting at the bottom point, I'm starting at the top where they cross over. So same thing, I'm lining up my fabric on those edges, but I'm going to start stitching from up here on top and then coming all the way down. And I'll do that on all 4 of these pieces. Still keeping my needle just to the right or the right on the line. Okay, the rain is finally stopping. And last one. And for the fun of it, let's make the half square triangle units I was telling you about. So here's my stitch line that I just did. So now I'm going to sew a 1/2 inch from that line. I'm going to use the line that's on my machine, my 1/2 inch mark, and I'm just going to stitch all the way down 1/2 inch on all these. Right there. And last one. Just takes a second, and you just made yourself 4 little half square triangles. So this one we're going to go ahead and just trim. Before I trim them though, I'm going to roll it back, making sure everything's lining up before I do any cutting. Just be safe than sorry. And all right where I need from the base. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut between these lines. And you'll see that you've just made yourself some little half square triangles. I think I made that one way too small. Right there in the middle. trimmed off a little bit more. Made one too thin. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and press these back. And then we'll open these up. All right, so those are the ones where we actually did that extra seam. So if I just press these to the dark side, now they're not wasted little pieces, but you got some tiny little half square triangles. Instead of having these, you can have these by just sewing an extra seam. All right, so let's get these, set the seam, and then we're going to gently roll this back and press it. I got a nice seam allowance right here on the top. That's what we're looking for. Set the seam and then roll it back, gently pressing it down. Any more questions for me, Olivia?
Nope.
Good, good.
You said great ideas that God can especially.
Huh?
Great ideas.
Oh. Saving a little bit on the fabric. Fabric's expensive. And last one, then we'll be constructing the final block. Let those set for a second, and we'll just go ahead and press these four back. Pressing all these to the dark side. Now, I don't know what size blocks they are. You would probably have to trim them to whatever size that you're working with, but it looks like you easily have little 2.5-inch squares at least by doing that. They're all going to be a little bit different. So let's see what these size measure out to be. All right, grabbing these. I think now we just have to lay out our final block, and then we'll be putting it all together in rows. But let's see what size these little pieces are. This one here is, yeah, 2.5 inches. So all of these could easily be little 2.5-inch squares. This one, of course, is 2 7/8. So here, quickly, you'd be able to make a whole bunch of 2.5-inch squares by just taking that extra step and sewing that line. And you can do that with every one of the flying geese that we're actually doing in this project. Okay, so we just got done with all of those. These units have turned into units U3. So if you wanted to label them as you're making them, put them all U3. These are all U3s. The G's you're going to be using for this block, and you're just using the actual fabric. You're not doing any sewing with it. And this one needs 2 G's. So I'm going to grab 2 of my G, and I believe they're 3.5-inch squares. So I got 2 of my G's. I got my 2 half-square triangles. And then all of these have a name. So the one with the lightest fabric, this is U4C. These two, the matching, these are U4Bs. And the one with the darkest fabric with the T, this is U4A. So it's on top. So grabbing our little 4-patch on point, that's our centerpiece. The top row consists of the U4A, that's the one with the T fabric. It's on top. Just going to go ahead and put this together in front of us. In fact, I might get my designer board here. I'm going to lay it on this board here. I'm going to set this here. White on top. Grabbing my U4A, goes here. Point going in. U3 and U3 are on both sides. And if looking at the photo, it's the darker side that's on the outside. darker side on the outside. Here and here. Then we've got the two U4Bs. Those are the two that were the same. The point is going in, so that sits here and here. Then grabbing our U4C point going up, it's on the bottom, and our two G units on each corner. I'm going to get them right sides up. Some of these fabrics you can tell which is right sides. So this is our block. So we're going to sew this together in rows. We're going to sew these two to this one, then we're going to sew these to here, and these to here, and then we're going to sew the rows together. All right, so I'm going to take this to the table and we're going to get started. Before I do that, do we have any questions? Everybody good? Can't say, power keeps going out. Hey, Margot. Let me tell you, that it was one heck of a storm right now. Holy cow. And you know, they've been telling us that we weren't going to have any rain for the next 10 days. I guess they didn't see this one because they always say there's going to be no rain, but yet we got it coming. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and sew these three pieces together. So I'm going to start with my center, and I'm going to slide it over onto this one. So I'm going to just chain piece these together. So I'm going to take these two, place this over top of this one. Now these seams should nest because we press this to the dark side, and this flying geese is pressing down. So I should be able to nest these two seams right here. Get it the way I want it. You should feel it nest as you're lining up your edges. Sort of, because this one here is open, but I want that to kind of fit right into there. And then we're going to stitch 1/4 of an inch all the way down, lining up all of my edges. Shouldn't be any bias here. Should just be straight of grain all the way down. Going to be sure to reset my machine. I had it in the center, so let's go ahead and get it to the stitching setting that I've been using, and we're just going to go ahead and sew all the way down. I'm going to kind of chain piece this. So now I'm going to take the center section, and I'm going to show you something a little bit different. So now I'm going to take these two pieces, and I'm going to place this one on top, the center on top, line up my edges. Now what I'm looking for here, I've got a point here and I have a point here, and I want those points to touch, and I'm seeing that they're both about 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to match up my points really good and match up my edges. You could grab a clip, you could put it here. You don't want to lose your points. And then we're just going to sew 1/4 of an inch all the way down. I see this little X right here, and I don't want to sew to the left of that X. I want to be either right on it or just to the right of that X, because that is your points on your seam. So you don't want to lose your points. Now we're going to go ahead and get this pressed the rest of the way. I like to take a look, make sure it didn't bobble, and it's right where I need for it to be. Now we're going to grab this last one, and we're just going to kind of keeping all these chained together. Now this one here we're just sewing onto a single block with no stitching, so we're just going to stitch this all the way down. Go ahead and separate these. Before I go any further, let's take a look and see how good are we on our points. Pretty good. I think I probably need to bring this one in just a little bit more, and I'm going to see if it's shifted a little bit. It looks like it did. So I am not happy with, I didn't lose my point here, but I have too much point showing right here. So I'm going to take that little bit of stitching out and I'm going to try to move that over just a little bit. It's going to make it look a little bit better. I think my, oh, here's my seam ripper. So I'm just going to take out some of the stitches. I don't need to take them all out. So I'm just going to go back maybe about a 1/2 inch from each side of that center, or maybe an inch, just a little bit. We're going to straighten that up just a little bit without having to take the whole thing apart. Make it just a little bit better. I'm just clipping, or I'm using my seam ripper, and I'm just kind of taking out some of the stitches, and then I'll pull it out. On the other side where I knew I had done some clipping, and I should be able to grab a thread and lift it, and it should just lift all the way out, just like this. Lift all the way out. So I guess I took out about 2 inches right there across that center. Slide this up just a little bit more. I'm going to go from the back side because I knew I need to get a little bit closer to this point right here. And I'm going to, making sure everything is good on this side, and I'm going to go back about an inch from where I started and where my stitches are. I'm going to do a little back tack right here, and I'm going to go all the way across again. And that's closer. And back tack when I get to the other side. Trying to stay within that stitch line because I think I press open my seams here. Now there we go. That's much, much better. Much better. Let's line that one back up, and then the last one, got a good seam allowance there. Here. So now we're going to grab the third one. We're going to line that seam right up there on the top of that flying geese. You should be able to feel that seam right there in there. I don't know where my leader is. We're just going to stitch that down. All right, so when I'm looking at this one here, I see I have just shy of a 1/4 inch on this side, but I've got well over a 1/4 inch on this one. I'm going to trim a little bit of that excess off right here because it's part of it is that. So we're going to match up these points before we stitch it, and I'm going to clip those points, clip it together. So I'm looking at the points that's on the inside, and I'm matching up those. You could grab a pin, or you can grab a clip. I'm going to use a clip. Now I'm going to clip it here, and because this side it seems to be narrower than this side, I'm going to flip this over, and I'm going to stitch from the back side on this one. It is two different seam allowances for some reason. Going to match up my edges, but I'm seeing that one side's going to go in just a little bit. We'll see how this turns out because I truly don't know. Looks like I made a ooby, made a boo-boo. Closer. Trying to keep it no different than what it was. Staying at that 1/4 inch, going right here into here. And matching up my edges again. And then sewing the last one on. All right, we're going to go press these first before we go to the next step, but let's take a look and see how well we did on the other side. Right where I need it to be. See, the points are right, no points lost, points right there in the center. I don't know if you guys can see that, right where I need it. Okay, so this one here is not a press open. I found this one was easier if we, I believe I pressed it, you know what, I'm going to take a look. What did we do? So here's number 4. So we pressed these, when we were doing these rows, I pressed the centers to the end and I pressed the outer pieces to the outside. So that's what we did to be able to nest these rows together real good. Knowing that the half square triangles are on top, and this is going in and this one is going out. So these two seams right here, I'm going to press these in. So I like to set my seam first, so I'm going to give it a set the seam, and then I'm going to press it inside, to the inside. So I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to kind of give it a little bit of a start with a finger press here. And then we're going to gently press that down, wanting that seam to go towards the inside. And the same thing for this one. Set the seam, and then we want that seam to go on the inside. Making sure I got it all the way out, particularly on this piece right here. There's a lot of bulk that was right there in that center section. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to set the press on top of that. Now these, both of these are being pressed to the, those pressed in, these are being pressed out. So let's go ahead and set the seam, and then we're pressing these out. I found it was easier to just nest it this way. And then when we do our final stitch, then we'll press the final seams open. That's this one. And then this one. All right, and let's give that one a little bit under here. All right, so these are the first two. So we're going to be taking these, nesting these seams right here and here. That's why we pressed in and out. And then the only focus left right here is to make sure we don't lose our points on the flying geese unit here. And then we don't want to lose this point on this upper piece right here. So I'm going to go ahead and line these up. I'm going to nest that seam here because we pressed them in and out. Grabbing a clip, I'm going to clip that one. I'm going to look on the center here. I'm going to line up those points. I don't want to lose any of the points, so I'm lining them up, holding it back, kind of looking to make sure everything is lining up the way I want it. And I'm going to put a clip there in that center, and it's going to hold that one. And then the last one, nest these seams here. You should actually feel those nest really good right there, and then put a clip right there. flip it over and we're going to go ahead and pin the next one. Making sure that our point is going towards the center. You know what? I think I just did it upside down. I surely did. Woo! Glad I looked at that. All right, so the white is on top, so the dark is supposed to be up on top. So we're going to do this one again. We're going to go ahead and nest the seam. We want it to look like this, dark with the light here, light with this one here. Had to do a second look. I would have been pulling out Jack again. Ever done that? Pull out that ripper. Been using that ripper a lot lately. And just like I did before, I'm nesting up the seams and matching up that center that I just talked about. You ever heard of the seam ripper named Jack? Olivia? Did you not know that? Jack the Ripper. There's a reason why he's named Jack. All right, so that one is lined up. Now we're going to go ahead and clip the bottom one. This one I'm going to start with my center first. So I see my point here, and I have a point here. Looks like it's a little bit more than a quarter inch, but I'm going to match up those points because that's what's most important. Don't want to lose the little points. Clip there. Go ahead and nest the seam here. My edge is all right. Clip here. And the last clip here. All right, so now we're just going to stitch and stitch. Okay. And making sure we're at our quarter inch. And we're stitching straight down. Putting those seams nesting right there. Do a double check. Everything should look good. Yep. There's a little bulk right here, so I'm going to kind of hold it down. There we go. And then the last stitch. Let's flip it around and let's start on the second side. Got these seams right here. You want to line up these seams here, making sure everything's right in the center. Make sure everything is staying nested. Coming on to the first big point. Always like to do a second look. Looks like I have a little bit of a shift right here. Holding it flat down, and there we go. Nesting that seam here. And then we're coming up to the edge where I've got these seams right here. I want to make sure I got my centers in the center. And that should do it. Do the big reveal. No points lost here. No points lost here. Nested there, and got a good seam allowance here where I had to get these points, these centers lined up, and centers lined up here. So we now go press this open. going to set the seams. Get that thread to relax into the fabric. And then we're going to go ahead and start opening up our seams, and then this block will be finished, and you just got to do 3 more. So I'm opening it up, and I'm going to go ahead and get I'm pressing these seams open. So I got it started with my little tool here, and we're going to open up as we go, and we're going to gently press down without sliding it, no distorting. Got a little bit of bulk right here to press this open. But it's better to press this seam open than to have pressed it one way or the other, because then it would just be thicker. By pressing it open, it's spreading out that bulk. And when you go to quilt this, you're going to appreciate that. A lot of thickness going on right there at all these junctures. So by pressing some of these seams open, it's going to be not as thick to work with. Lynn, she does all the quilting of our big things here. I do some small things, so she would appreciate this, not having so much to go through. So I got that one nice and flat, so let's get the second one opened up. Get started here, and I'm just it up as we go. No sliding, no pushing, just lift and press. Coming to where it gets real thick right here. Doesn't want to cooperate with me right here. Here we go. Being sure not to lift up any other seams. All right, now we're going to flip her over. And we're going to press from the top. Make sure everything is smoothed out. When I do my final press, that's where I like to add a little steam or a little moisture, just to see to set it just a little bit. I don't put water in my iron. I like to put it on myself. I think it extends the life of your iron, at least for me. About got it all smoothed out. Now we're going to set it right here. Give it a couple seconds underneath there, and I'm going to take it over to the table. We're going to do a quick measure. We need this to be 12 and a half inches. And this one worked out really good. So I got this one 12 and a half inches, so I only have 2 more to go. All right, so let's go ahead and take this over there and see what we got. 12 and a half inches is the number we are looking for. A little shy right here, but it's pretty close. 12 and a half inches here to here. And right on the money for this one. So that one worked real good for me. A scant quarter is what works best for me to meet all of what I'm needing it to be. So let's go back over to the wall. We'll put this right beside the first one I had done. I'm not sure where they go in the quilt, but that's what you're looking for it to be 12 and a half inches, and that's the look. We almost had this one over here. Glad we took a second and checked it before we moved on to the next spot. But there you are. So you learned how to make a 4-patch on point. Again, we worked again on doing our half square triangles and making some more flying geese and then putting it all together. So that is this project. I hope you enjoy making block number 4, and I hope you are all caught back up. So in a month, we'll be getting together again on block number 5. So I'm going to look at the calendar, that date. We will be meeting again on May the 28th. May the 28th. We will be doing the Tealing Good. Oh, I looked at this one. So this one is month 5. And we're actually bringing in a fabric that we haven't even pulled out of here yet. I'm trying to remember, was it B or is it J? Yeah, J. We haven't even used fabric J yet, so we'll be actually using fabric J in this project on month 5. J is only used in month 5, so I guess it's these pieces right here. So this one here looks like, it looks a lot of fun. We got some blocks going on here. We have on point 4 patches here. I don't think I see any flying geese in this one. No, maybe that's a, I'm not sure. Is that a flying geese unit? No, I don't think we have flying geese. Looks like we have stitch and flip, covered corners, maybe some strip sewing and then trimming. We might be using that, our 1 5/8 ruler for this one, I think. So those of you who got the kit that has the 1 5/8 by 20-inch ruler, I actually have that. That's going to be utilized in block in number 5. And it looks like we're doing a mirror image. So we're going to looks like we're having to 5A and 5B. So they look identical, except from what I could see, it's the top corners where you're going to have the blue and the white, the light going to be opposite of each other. So you're going to make 4 of block 5A and 4 of block 5B. So that's what we're going to be doing again on May the 28th. So today is the 30th, last day of the month. So we do have our fabric sale coming up on Thursday. So be sure to tune in at that. Same channel, 1 o'clock. And we'll be announcing the winner for our subscription box. Our Sew and Show subscription box will be announced at that one. And I believe tomorrow the May subscription box will be starting to ship out. And I hope you like that one. It absolutely was a lot of fun. All right, so thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed it. First time I've been on a while. Lisa, where did you go, gal? I heard you lost. Yeah, I lost a little bit. Okay, so again, thank you. I'll be, if you have any comments, just put them into the comments. I'll be reading this a little bit later, catching up on everything. Thank you for hanging out with us today. It was a lot of fun. All of these videos will be up, whether you have the kit or not. This is something that you can easily follow along. Learn some new tricks, some techniques, things that I do that I hope make things a little bit easier for you to help you get that perfect quarter or quarter-inch or scant quarter-inch shape. And we're just learning some really cool techniques from making 4 patches, putting things on point, just a lot of fun things that we're doing with this block. And I have ordered the next block of the month. I'm not sure when it's going to be in. I think I'm looking at ordering 2 more. So I'm not sure if we're going to be doing them concurrently or if we're going to be consecutively, but we're going to be doing them pretty soon. So we got some new ones coming. I hope you're going to like them. All right, thank you so much again, everybody. You have a fantastic, fantastic Tuesday. And I will be seeing you all on Thursday. Bye-bye, everybody.